Hi guys, so we're back again every day this week teaching you guys about Africa. This is my first one this week, so if you're new to us this week, then my name's Liam and I'm one of the animal keepers here at Zoo2U. So as I said, this week we're going to be talking about Africa and quite a few different animals that you might find in Africa. Now, as Melissa said on Monday, we're not going to be going through the whole of Africa because that would take us months. There's millions of different animals in Africa, probably hundreds, maybe even thousands of different species. So we're just going to introduce you to a few of them. And today we've got one of the really small species, but also quite interesting. So hopefully you'll enjoy it. Now, before we start, I just want to give a mention to our animal adoption packages, which are relatively new to us. We only launched them a few months ago. And hopefully you guys have heard of them. But if not, then there's loads of information that you can get from Melissa. If you drop her an email on the bottom of the page there, she'll be happy to give you all the information about the animal adoption packages. And the gold package, our highest level of adoption package, basically gives you the opportunity to come in and meet your animal that you've adopted. So it's really a one-to-one experience with your animal and a keeper, and it's a really cool little thing that you can do with the gold adoption package. So get in touch if you want any further information about the adoption packages. There are a few different levels, so you can pick the one that's more suited to you. So we have been setting your homework all week. We haven't given anybody any weekly homework this time. It's mainly just been the daily homework that we've been passing out this week. So basically every day we're going to introduce you to a new animal, and then each day we want you to write a fact file about that animal. So everything I teach you today about the sun beetle that we're going to be looking at, you can write on your fact file. And even if you guys have a bit more information, if you can do some research yourself as well and add some more information, that would be great as well, because I'm not going to tell you everything about it. I'm going to tell you the majority of stuff, the important stuff. But if you can find out some information as well, maybe you could even teach us a few things as well, which would be really, really cool. So it's not only listen and write, it's also do a little bit of research as well if you can. That would be really, really cool. So what we want them to make we want you guys to make them as colourful as you can, and basically, just be really, really inventive with it. So we've had some really, really cool homework so far. When we did the classification, it was really, really inventive, really imaginative, and the rainforests, we were really impressed with all of them as well. So hopefully this will follow that trend, and you guys will be able to come up with some really, really cool ideas for your fact files as well. So as I said, today we're going to be looking at the sun beetle. Now, this isn't going to be everybody's favourite animal. It's one of my favourite animals because not really many people like them too much, and that's because they're invertebrates, they're creepy crawlies. So basically, they're not going to be everybody's favourite. That's just how it is, unfortunately. But hopefully some of you guys will like it. Some of you guys will be interested in it. And we'll just bring him out. Here he is, just on this leaf. There we go. I don't know if you guys can see that. Really, really nice looking little beetle. So this is our sun beetle. Now, we did have quite a few, but they have a really, really short lifespan. So they don't really last very long. So if you don't have loads of them, then you're gonna end up with none in quite a short space of time, really. So this one at the minute is our only adult. Hopefully there might be a few eggs in the soil. We've not actually had a look yet. It's better not to disturb them, and then maybe we'll have a few babies as well. But at the minute, this is our only adult. As I said, we did have quite a few, but unfortunately, they don't last very long. So we're going to jump straight in and talk to you about this little guy or girl, and basically tell you that these live on the forest floor. So if you listen to my presentation a couple of days ago, when will it be now, last week, about the forest floor on Friday, then you will have learned that the forest floor is basically one giant compost heap, and basically all the animals that live there contribute to the forest floor, in some more than others. Invertebrates like this little guy here, really important. Now, this one isn't as important as the millipedes and the cockroaches and stuff, because it's not technically a detritivore. I don't know if you guys can remember that word that I mentioned on Friday. Detritivore basically means they eat rotten, like leaves, vegetation, fruit, that nobody else wants to eat. And then once they've eaten that, then they digest it. When it comes out the other end, then it helps to fertilize all the soil. These guys aren't part of that group. They're actually herbivores. So they are reliant on the forest floor to, provide for them. And they will eat fruit even if it's on the turn a little bit, even if it is going a little bit moldy. But they do usually like things that are a bit more ripe. So in other parts of the world, they are actually known as fruit beetles. We call them sun beetles. That's the more common name. But fruit beetles is another common name as well. And that's because they love to eat fruit. So when we feed them, we give them, a couple of pieces of banana or plums or grapes. They love all different types of fruit. They can also eat veg as well and leaves, like I say, but fruit is definitely the favorite. So we like to spoil them a little bit here, just because we like to spoil our animals. These are never going to be wild, so they don't really need to, they don't need to have a strict wild diet. Like, for example, they might not find bananas and stuff in the wild, but because they're nice for them, they enjoy bananas, we like to give them bananas. So as I mentioned, they are invertebrates, which basically means they don't have a backbone. They don't actually have any bones. They've just got this hard exoskeleton on the outside, this hard shell, which in these guys is a really cool color. So he's playing really difficult at the minute, and hiding behind leaves and stuff, but hopefully you can see the nice yellow and browns that he's got on his body, and also the black on the back of the shell as well. And this exoskeleton basically gives him a little bit of shape. It gives him rigidity, and helps him basically to walk around and stuff, because if he didn't have it, he wouldn't have any form at all. There wouldn't be any shape to him because he doesn't have any bones. His skeleton isn't like ours at all. It's on the outside. So it's like if he didn't have this shell on the outside, it's like if we didn't have any bones, we wouldn't be able to stand up or anything like that. So his shell is really important to him. Now, you might think it's hard for invertebrates to grow if they don't have any bones, but they do it a little bit differently to us. They actually molt their skin. So these guys, he'll fully molt his shell once he's grown out of it. Some beetles only actually do it one time because, as I said, the lifespan is really short. So when they're adults, they'll come out of the cocoon, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then they've got this nice orange, yellow, orange, brown, and black color. And then probably in about 3 months after that, they'll molt all that off because they've outgrown it, and then they've got a nice bright shell underneath it as well. So they completely molt the shell off when they've outgrown it, and a new shell grows underneath. So that's basically how they grow. Invertebrates, which live a lot longer than these guys, will molt multiple times. For example, tarantulas, if anybody keeps tarantulas, they molt loads, especially when they're younger. They molt, probably once every 2 months, 3 months, something like that. And then when they become adults, they molt less often, but they still do molt every time they grow. So that's how these guys are growing. Now, I mentioned a cocoon, and that's because these guys go through something called metamorphosis. And that basically means they start off as one thing and they turn into something completely different. The animals that are probably most famous for this is butterflies. Caterpillars turn into butterflies. And beetles, a lot of beetle species are exactly the same. So say, for example, if this guy or girl was to lay an egg or a few eggs, they actually only lay one egg at a time, but then a week later they can lay another and then another and then another. So if she was to lay a few eggs, in a couple of days, those eggs would hatch, and there'd be really small little grubs that come out of it. They actually, when they're really small, they just come out of the egg, they look like maggots. So if you are keeping them as pets, it's really easy to confuse them for maggots. But then they're pretty much like machines. They constantly eat. They eat through all whatever you put in there. They'd eat through it all, and that's because they need to grow really, really quickly. So what they do is they'll constantly eat, constantly eat, constantly eat, and then in about something like 5 months' time, they'll be fully grown, and they'll probably be about that big. Now that is compared to the sun beetle, which is just here on the leaf, is probably about double the size in terms of how big the grub actually gets, which is really, really strange because they eventually turn into the sun beetle. But what they do is they wrap themselves in loads of mud, and then they'll stick to something, like a leaf in the wild, or if you've got them in a big tank, it'll probably be the side of the tank or something like that. And then that takes a good few months for them to change the body, for them to go through the whole metamorphosis process, and they basically then turn into a beetle eventually. And the beetle will break out of the cocoon, the mud that it's wrapped itself around in, and then it'll look like this, like the sun beetle. So they go through quite a drastic change throughout their lives. And like I say, in terms of when they get to adulthood, they pretty much only live for about 6 months, something like that. Some of them only live for 3 months, but the majority will live for around 6. So it is quite a short lifespan. And on the whole, from all the way from egg all the way up to adult, it's probably maybe about a year, something like that. All around, it's about a year. So, these guys aren't something you have for a long, long time, but they are really, really good breeders. So, like I say, we're hoping we've got some eggs in the soil. This one actually came from an egg that was produced while they were here. So the previous generation produced quite a few eggs, and this one came from that previous generation. So, even though these die off quite quickly, they do produce over and over again, and then you get quite new ones quite often, to be fair. So as I've mentioned, these do live in Africa. All of our animals we're speaking about this week live in Africa, but they live in a much different place than the meerkats and the tortoises that you've already met, because they don't live in the desert. As I've mentioned, they live on the forest floor. There are actually 9 different subspecies, so 9 different types of sun beetles, and every single one of them lives in Africa. So as you can imagine, with them living in Africa, it's nice and hot all the time, all year round. Africa doesn't have seasons like we do. They just have a wet season and a dry season. So it's warm all year round, which means if you are keeping these as pets, they need to be kept at a really nice temperature. An average temperature of around 25 degrees is really, really good for them. Anywhere between 20 and 28 is acceptable, but 25 is ideally where they need to be at, really. And you can do that through a heated room or a heat mat underneath their enclosure or something like that. But another really important thing for them is humidity as well. So in the forest, where it's packed with leaves and trees and loads of different plants, it's going to get really, really humid. So that in the wild environment, the humidity is off the scale, really. So to do that in captivity, we spray them quite a lot. Once or twice a day, they'll get sprayed, and that basically the water mixed with the heat keeps it really, really humid in their enclosure. So they are really, really easy to keep as pets, as long as you've got the humidity and the heat. They pretty much take care of the rest themselves. We feed them once a week. So like I say, we just throw some fruit in for them once a week, and then every week we change it. We make sure the soil's nice and moist, nice and humid. And we try not to dig through the soil too much. So if you do end up getting these guys as pets, as I say, really easy to look after, and try not to dig through the soil too much, because if there are eggs in there, or if there are grubs, you could disturb them, and then they might not they might not hatch if they're eggs, or they might just stop growing if they're grubs, because obviously grubs really, really vulnerable. Really, really vulnerable little animals when they're grubs. So anything can hurt them really and can really shock them. So basically, when they're below adult stage, just try your best to leave them alone. And then when they're adult stage, you can handle them like I am doing here, and they're usually quite fine with it. Just make sure you're not picking them up from the top, because you can startle them. Make sure they're comfortable walking onto you. They can't bite or anything like that, so you don't need to worry about that. They're really, really cool little creatures, and I can pretty much guarantee nobody else around you is going to have any of these as pets, because they're quite unusual. You do see them quite a lot in zoos, but in terms of having them as pets, they're actually really, really uncommon. The last thing I'll tell you about these guys is that they get eaten a lot. So they're actually prey species. Mainly when the grubs, lots of different things love to eat them because grubs are full of protein. And also they are actually used as, they can be used as live food as well. When the grubs, you can buy them to feed to your reptiles, like your lizards, your chameleons, and your bearded dragons and stuff. But we don't want to do that. I'm not advocating that. These guys are really, really cool. And for us, they're more show animals than anything else. Even though they don't do a lot, they look really, really nice. They're probably the nicest looking invertebrates that we've got at the minute. So yeah, really, really cool. So that's pretty much all I can tell you about the sun beetle. There's not really too much else that I can tell you at the minute. But like, hopefully you guys will come up with more stuff basically to tell us. So I haven't told you every single little thing about the sun beetle because that would be impossible. I don't know every single thing about it. So if you do some research and you find some things about the sun beetle that I haven't told you, then that's perfect. Stick that in your fact file and we'll have a look at that when you send it in. So we're just going to go for a quick recap. We spoke about the forest floor. We mentioned about the sun beetle living on the forest floor and how the forest floor is important to loads of different animals, especially invertebrates, because number one, it gives them food, it provides them with food, but also it provides them with protection as well, because the exoskeleton doesn't really provide them with that much protection. We also met the sun beetle, the little sun beetle who is our only adult at the minute. Hopefully he'll be joined soon with some little new friends. And we've spoken about loads of different things about the sun beetle. So we talked about his diet, how he lives, the metamorphosis, which is really, really important. So try your best to add all of those things into your fact file, and hopefully you can come up with more stuff as well. We'll show us some of your homeworks tomorrow. So don't forget to post your work on the Facebook page. So just before we go, we're going to just quickly mention the fundraiser once again. I know if you've listened to these presentations before, you've probably heard it before, but hopefully there's some new people who haven't heard it yet. We're predominantly outreach, which means we go out to schools and parties and business events and stuff like that. And with everything going on at the minute, it's impossible for us to go out. So we've literally got no money coming in at all. And obviously all the animals need feeding, which is the most important thing. But they also need looking after as well. It's not just about feeding them. It's about making sure they've got the correct veterinary care. They've got loads of enrichment to make sure they're nice and happy, amongst other things as well. So the fundraiser isn't about just feeding our animals. It's about making sure they've got the best care possible. So if you can donate, the link's on the page. Also the PayPal link if you want to donate through PayPal, that'll be perfect. So we've got about 13 days left on the fundraiser, I think, something like that. We're about £500 off our target. So if you could really, really push the fundraiser, as I said on Friday, if you've already donated, thank you very, very much. We really appreciate it. But please tell your friends, tell your family, and hopefully they will be able to donate a little bit as well. So thanks a lot for listening, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and we really look forward to seeing all of your fact files about your sun beetles. Cheers, guys.